Unbelievable.
Going under the train.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
What
What'd you say?
It's just like you were going under the train again.
Yeah.
Rolling under that train.
Yeah. Well, what a spectacular, otherworldly, literally experience. I mean,
Yeah, it's such a sweet film, God.
looks like it's a lot of fun.
You know, we did have a blast doing it. It felt like we were always in a car, you know, watching it. And there's a lot that isn't in the car, but it just felt like we spent endless hours sitting in a car with them trying to figure out, you know, what a new place they could put the camera was to keep it interesting, you know, so it wasn't always being shot from the same angle or.
Yeah. So what did you do to prepare for this role?
You know, I think that I was very initially frightened of doing this role. I turned it down, I think, 3 times. And I have to hand it to John Carpenter. He just kept coming back and trying to persuade me. I thought, gosh, how do you do this? You know, the premise was such an odd one, you know, she wakes up and finds this, you know, baby on the floor who morphs into her dead husband. Turns out to be this being from another world. And while I enjoyed reading the script, it was a kind of what if that I was dubious, that I really had to question myself, do I know how to make this real? Is there a way I can make this person authentic? Or am I going to feel like I'm, you know, pretending all the time, or making something up all the time? And you know, when Jeff was cast, which I think was after I had said yes to the film, they had a couple of other actors in mind at different points, and Jeff kind of came onto it last minute. John was very frustrated, John Carpenter, because he couldn't quite find the person that he wanted to play the Starman. And there were a couple of people that the studio was trying to talk him into. And Jeff walked into his office, and he was not very keen on Jeff, but Jeff walked in with the character that you see there on the screen. And Jeff, when he read the script, he decided he was going to study birds in his yard and how they moved and the way in which their attention sort of riveted on something and then shifted to something else. And he just decided that's where he would start with his characterization. And he walked into John's office moving the way he moves when we first see him, and doing these movements with his head and kind of just playing around with it. And he just won John over the moment that they met, practically.
Yeah. He so completely stays in character.
Yeah.
And I mean, just everything about him is transformed. I mean, it's not the Jeff Bridges that we know.
Yeah.
And just even the way his face appears, and you know, yes, the bird-like gestures, which at first, you know, you have to sort of get used to it. But I think he pulls it off. I think that it's a pretty extraordinary.
I think it's a beautiful performance.
Yeah.
I just love watching him.
There's an unguardedness and an innocence about the character that seems authentic.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of who he is as a person, too. He is very unguarded and very open and very, I mean, he's just a fountain of creativity. I mean, whenever he wasn't, we did more things. It was the first time I'd ever worked with an actor where, from the very beginning, he was like, so what can we do to give back something to the crew? And I thought, you know, we talked about it and stuff, and he had this incredible camera called a wide lux camera. And the two of us started taking pictures with this camera almost from the very beginning of the shoot. And we ended up making a book together of photographs of the shooting of the film. And he was also always, he's very musical, he was playing his guitar all the time and writing songs, and then he decided that we should be working on an album together. Whenever we had some downtime. So we were playing around because we loved to sing together, and so, you know, it was just, there was never a moment where he wasn't sort of...
He was fun.
He was great fun.
Yeah. There's actually online a video of Karen and Jeff singing the Everly Brothers' Dream, which I recommend. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's much more in tune than the moments in the film. Whenever I see the film, I think, oh, we don't sound that great together. But actually, we really, our voices sounded really good together in the one that we eventually
absolutely.
made. Yeah.
You have a wonderful singing voice. Absolutely. Did you train as a singer? Have you sung?
No, I grew up singing. I have two sisters who we kind of grew up harmonizing together when we started from when we were kids. And my dad sort of encouraged us, and he had one of those old woolen sack recorders, and he used to, we'd do these like radio shows on Saturday or Sunday afternoon, and he would have the three of us like learn harmonies for songs, and then we'd do this little thing where we'd like put on radio shows and stuff, and he would record us.
Cool. And you play harmonica too, yeah?
I did play the harmonica, although that came later. When I really fell in love with the blues when I was 16, 17, 18, I started playing harmonica when I started listening to some of the great harmonica players, Little Walter and Jimmy Reed and some of those.
Very cool.
Amazing.
Yeah, the harmony with Jeff is fabulous. On this video, you should really check it out. They really get into it. So what was distinctive about working with John Carpenter? I mean, every director, I think, is different in the way that every actor is different. I mean, one of my great pleasures is working with actors and trying to connect their language, because they're all different and respond in different ways and have different things they do. How was John Carpenter distinctive in your experience?
You know, the things I remember the most about him was, first of all, he has this team of people that he worked with from his very first film, which I guess was Halloween. Was that his first film? I'm not sure.
I think it might have been, yeah.
Yeah, but he worked with the same group of people again and again and again. So it was a very tight crew, and it was quite wonderful because, you know, they hardly needed to speak to each other. They just knew how John wanted things to be set up, and there was a kind of an ease in the shooting, which was fantastic. And John, I think, you know, with Jeff and I, he was a little cautious about saying too much to us. I mean, I think he wanted very much for it to unfold and for us to really be discovering the characters. I mean, going back to your first question, kind of hard to prepare for a role like this. I mean, it's because it is so in the moment. I mean, I didn't really know how Jeff was going to play the character in the big picture, or how the relationship between the two of them would develop. So it was kind of a unique film for me, in the sense that the only real preparation I could do and that I needed to do was really to develop the kind of deep connection that she felt with her husband.
Yeah.
So that from the time we meet her, you know, she's in this place. It hasn't been that long since she lost him, and she's still very much grieving for his loss. And so when this being comes along who inhabits his body but really isn't him, just trying to find that place where she's torn between the horror of him and the total need for him and desperate wish that it really was Scott. So, you know, that was kind of what I felt like I could bring to it, and then I had to just really try to just be in the film moment to moment and see what happened between these two people.
Because it's an incremental change in your character that brings you to connect with him. And so it takes time. And I think that one of the things, you know, that I always enjoy about performing performance is the multiple faces of character. It's not always achieved, but you know, Jeff's character's development is subtle. And you, to a certain extent, animate the dynamic because your development is quite specific and distinct, and you move from here to there, and we really see 100 different faces of your character.
Yeah.
And to me, that really is the anchor that pulls us through this thing. So, you know, the chemistry that develops is largely through your change of connection to him. But there's just many different sides and faces of your character that I think really
yeah, the way in which she comes to just stop being so full of fear and start to she really starts to fall in love with him.
Well, the deer is a turning point.
The deer is definitely a turning point.
Yeah. When he animates the deer.
Yeah. And when he says, I mean you no harm, I mean that he has sort of, you know, that he has found the language in order to reassure her that he's not going to hurt her and that this isn't, you know, that he needs her help. And
right. Yeah, because yes, he totally does. It's got nice humor. It's got nice humor. It is that John Carpenter meat and potatoes kind of filmmaking. There's no pretense here. It's just, here we go, folks, you know.
Yeah.
And the special effects are what they are, and they're fun. You know, you'd never get away with that now, basically. But it's...
yeah, but they're not awful. I mean,
no,
you know, just even watching the end there, I mean, I suppose it is very primitive special effects, this big, you know, globe sort of coming down into the crater. And yet, there's something very, you know, it works on its own level.
Yeah,
you know?
totally. It's part of the world he creates.
Yeah.
And the car, I mean, it's just all of the elements in the design. The diner, it's of a piece. It's a world that is seamless and takes us in. And it includes the special effects. One more question, then maybe we'll have a question from the audience, but just in your work during that time, in terms of, what was your thinking in terms of roles for women? I mean, this is a pretty interesting, I think, dimensional woman character. And of course, we talked last night about Indiana Jones, and particularly the starting point for your character, which really lays out a kind of woman that was unusual in film. What kind of roles were you being offered? What kind of roles did you find that most satisfied you? Was it difficult in terms of how you felt, you know, as an actress, you wanted to represent women?
Well, I was thinking about the question that you asked me last night, which I think I didn't really answer. I went off tangentially, which is how did falling in love with acting through seeing Jerzy Grotowski's company work, how did that really affect my work in films or in my later work? And I think there is a connection to somehow starting out in experimental theater and being influenced by that level of work that these actors were doing, and it became sort of my aspiration was to, you know, I really wanted to try to find roles that I felt I could connect to deeply and that shifted something, you know, that where there was something really to be said. And I think after I did Raiders of the Lost Ark, it was almost a reason why I then didn't do a film for a couple of years. I went back and I did a couple of plays in the theater. And I think that the roles I got offered after Raiders of the Lost Ark were sort of similar roles, but not as good as that film. And I think I was being offered, I remember there was a period of time where people would send me scripts and I would throw them across the room at my closet when I finished reading them because I hated how the woman was being characterized in the film. And I think that I had this, even though I didn't necessarily articulate it very much at the time, I just had this feeling that I wanted to portray, you know, women that I really thought were very fully dimensional people. Mm-hmm. And I think that, you know, the film business still, even though, you know, they you know, give you know, they like to say that they're developing, you know, more and more great female roles, and there are really wonderful female roles, but I think generally it you know, they're few and far between, and you have to really, if you want to find the ones that are really meaningful to you, you have to be very patient. You have to be willing to sometimes not work, or sometimes do a play instead of a film, or sometimes direct something because there's nothing out there for you to do, because we all want to keep working. I mean, actors act, and you don't want to go for long periods without doing anything. You feel like you get sort of rusty if you don't work for too long a period of time. But it's sometimes very, you know, very worth saying no, you know, to just saying no to things, and feeling like it's important to wait for something that really captivates you.
And it's unusual in some ways, because the industry also has pressure on you at that point, I'm sure, to take the jobs, to work, to be present.
Everybody does. I mean, you know, your agents, your fellow actors, you know, there's this sort of feeling, you know, that you know, if you want to have a career, you know, everybody has all these opinions. Everybody always thought I should move to Los Angeles. I never wanted to live in Los Angeles. I never did live in Los Angeles. And I managed to continue working without living in Los Angeles. But, you know, people, you just have to stop listening to what people say and listen to your own heart, you know? I mean, I guess that's what is important in life.
Yeah, and it seems to have worked, so, yeah. And just briefly, you have a fabric business in Great Barrington.
I have it's one of my loves since my childhood, and it's almost one of these, like, in a previous life kind of, you know, sometimes people are born. My son was sort of this way, you know, he knew what he wanted to do with his life very early on in life, and when I was a kid, I developed this complete and total love and fascination for textiles. Anything like patterns on fabrics and rugs, and the way people put things together, and textures of things. And when I was a child, like, I would go to a fabric store or to a rug store, and I would stand in, like, the entrance of the store, and I would look in, and my heart would, like, pound in my chest, and I would think, oh my God, oh my God. And then I would see, in my mind, I would see patterns of things. I would see how this one rug could become 100 different rugs, or this one design could become 100 different versions of that design. And I would stand there and I'd go into a kind of like ecstasy or something, like my imagination would just like explode all over the place. And I still feel that way about textiles to this day, and it's something that I've kind of put on the back burner, and then about 20 years ago, I went back to it. And started a little design company, and I learned how to use Japanese knitting machines, and I have a studio with Japanese knitting machines in it, and I create like my own textiles, but I also have a store where I've gone out to the world and I've found about 100 of my favorite textile designers all over the world, and I've brought all of their things to the store.
That's great. Yeah.
So it's another way I keep myself busy when I can't find anything interesting to do.
That's wonderful. Cool. We'll have to stop by there and see what you got. Do you have a question in the audience, though? Yeah.
Hi. Well, I think you definitely sold. All right. You were very, very believable. And it may be that I saw this movie with my kids at a time when I was spending a lot of time with them. And we were all, I mean, there were a couple of boys and a young girl, and they were all captivated by the movie. And in fact, many of the lines of it have become personal family catchphrases.
Like what?
Arizona, maybe. Nippy jumpy. Roadblock, yes.
People love to quote the one about the red light stop, green light go, yellow light go very, very fast.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I wondered if there have been, if people reacted to this script in a similar way where, you know, there are films where there are catchphrases that continue, you know, the beginning of a great friendship, you know, but this kind of stayed with us, and I was wondering, if you'd had people react to it that way. And, you know, I always thought that there would be a baby teacher sequel, and I was wondering if you ever...
You know, the world is waiting. We're waiting for this teacher, aren't we?
Oh my God.
Especially now.
Yeah.
Where is this teacher? He will know everything he knows, and you know, it's like, I feel like, I've rarely seen a film that I felt like set itself up so beautifully for a sequel with this great teacher, and why they have never pursued. Jeff and I have really worked at trying to see if people wouldn't move towards doing a sequel of this where this teacher, I just wonder if it's not too intelligent a film for anybody to know how to write.
Yeah.
You know, if this, you know, if we suddenly met this man and he was 30 years old, who would he be? And who is smart enough to know how to write him? You know, if there's somebody out there.
We've got a program for narrative filmmakers where we give these $10,000 grants twice a year, so we'll tell our alumni to get on it.
I know. Wouldn't you love to meet that child? I certainly would.
It's time.
Yeah.
Sure.
We need him.
Yes.
How do you feel about watching your films?
How do you feel about watching your films?
You know, it's a process for me. I think when I first see a film, I'm usually like, oh. You know, it's like you get, it's such a funny thing. You read a script, and I will visualize a film when I read the script. I start to have all kinds of ideas about the relationships and the characters and my own character, and I'll start to see, you know, the way a lot of us do when we read a really good novel. It comes to life in your imagination. So by the time we actually get to shooting it, I have a pretty clear sense of the film, at least that I see in my head. And then, you know, sometimes when you start to work on it, you know, it becomes a much more collaborative vision. You know, other actors step in, and then you see what they're going to bring, and the director and the production designer, you see what they're bringing, and so it becomes this collaborative process, but you always a little bit still have your own version of the film in your head, and you develop, as you're shooting it, your own version of your character, how you see the character and the way in which you see the trajectory of your performance, and it's all very abstract, but it still exists. So the first time I see a film, it's usually a shocking experience, and it can be wonderful, and it can be disappointing, and it can be a combination of the two. And we were talking a little bit about a film I did recently, where the film became a completely different film than the film I read and the film we shot. It was unrecognizable when I saw it, and that sometimes happens. So like I really enjoyed watching this right now. Sometimes I enjoy watching the other actors' performances more than I necessarily enjoy watching my performance. It's sort of like, you know, it's easy to take yourself for granted. It's like, oh, her. You know, it's like, you know, it's like, I feel like, you know, because I actually did the film and because I was there and I've seen it, you know, a few times, but I really still am always discovering the director's work, the cinematographer's work. Each time I see a film, I often see like new layers of the film that I maybe hadn't noticed as much other times. you develop a kind of preoccupation with different things at different times. But the further away I get from a film being made, it feels like the more I can just relax and sit back and enjoy my own performance in it. And I get less critical and less, it feels like I just accept what the film is and I can sit back and enjoy it like anybody else.
Well, we have to get ready for the evening event. I want to thank Karen for being so generous with her time.